He arrived early, earlier than everyone else. The kind of early that makes you wonder if someone is excited, anxious, or just trying too hard to be helpful. But it wasn't strange, not really. We'd known each other too long for me to question it. "Hey," he grinned, holding a half-empty coffee cup in one hand and a bundle of streamers in the other. "She said you guys needed help." She was my wife. And yes, she had mentioned that he offered to come set up before the rest of the guests arrived. Said it casually, like someone offering to bring an extra bottle of wine. Nothing dramatic, nothing worth filing away. I let him in, clapped his shoulder. He smelled like cologne I couldn't name and sleep I wasn't sure he'd gotten. She came down a few minutes later in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt. Sleeves rolled high, a checklist already scribbled and clutched in her fingers. "There's my team," she said, smiling brightly, then to him, with a touch of teasing in her tone. "You're on flower duty, mister. You always had a better eye for symmetry." He laughed. "Only because you boss me around. I prefer the term art director," she replied, winking. It should have been charming, and it was, at least at first. There was a rhythm between them. Sure. But why wouldn't there be? We'd all been friends since our 20s. We had history built on cheap beer, shared couches, lost jobs, and found apartments. He was there when I proposed. Stumbled through a toast that was more joke than speech. He called her sister once in front of his date at our wedding. That's what I told myself as I watched them arrange centerpieces on the dining table, gerbera daisies in antique jars. Her choice. He'd hold a jar while she adjusted the stems, tilting her head, asking, "Is that too tall?" He'd respond, "It's perfect, boss," and she'd laugh like she didn't notice how naturally he called her that. I was folding napkins into quiet triangles by the kitchen counter, half listening to their banter while choosing songs from the playlist. Every time I thought I'd found a good one, he had a better suggestion. They would nod in unison at a beat drop, finish each other's lyrics. Again, nothing that stood out. Nothing loud. But silence has a way of echoing things that don't fit. When he called her art director again, I looked up. She was smiling, one hand on his forearm as she laughed, just a second too long. Still, I said nothing. Why would I? This was my best friend. The one I'd let crash on our couch during his breakups. The one who once handed me tissues outside a hospital room. The one who stayed up with me after my dad died, drinking until we saw dawn and silence together. If there was anyone I didn't need to question, it was him. And if there was any space I didn't need to guard, it was my marriage. Or so I believed. The sun outside was getting lower, draping the house in that golden pre-evening haze. Balloons were tied, candles were lit. She had changed into a soft blue dress I hadn't seen before. Said she bought it last week. Said it was for me. He complimented her. I heard it. Looks like someone's trying to steal the spotlight. She rolled her eyes, but not in annoyance. In familiarity. I laughed it off. They'd always had that playful energy. I used to think it was the reason she got along with him so well. Now I wonder if it was the reason she stayed too close. Trust, like friendship, is not something you examine until it's tested. It's like drywall. You assume it will hold, until a crack appears, until pressure is applied in just the right, or wrong, place. Back then, there were no cracks I could see. Just shadows, barely enough to unsettle, more than enough to remember later. At one point, she handed him a lighter. Their fingers brushed. He didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. I did what any good host would do. I ignored it. Because that's what we're taught to do with discomfort. We push it down. Call it paranoia. Call it insecurity. Call it anything except what it might actually be. The body recognizing what the heart is still afraid to know. By the time the guests started arriving, the house looked beautiful, the kind of beautiful you photograph but don't touch. She was radiant, he was charming, I was grateful, and in that gratitude, I wrapped myself in the most dangerous illusion of all. That proximity means loyalty, that longevity means protection, that because he was my oldest friend, and she was my closest love, the two could never collide in a way that would erase me entirely. I was wrong, but I hadn't learned that yet. Not then, not when the cake was still in the fridge, untouched, not when his hands were still helping her tie the last ribbon on the welcome sign. Not when I looked at the two of them, and saw family. Instead of what they were already becoming. A secret, carved in the silence I was too kind to interrupt. It was around 4:30 in the afternoon. That lull before the pulse of a party begins to rise. When they said they needed to run out for a few last-minute things. "We're out of napkins," she said, holding up an empty package like a flag of surrender. "And I think we forgot candles. The good ones." He nodded beside her, already reaching for his keys. "I know a store nearby," he offered, almost too quickly. "We'll be back before people start arriving." I glanced at the time, did a quick mental inventory, and shrugged. "Go fast," I said, grinning. "You know how early Sarah and Nick like to show up. Always 30 minutes before they should." She laughed, and it landed wrong. Or maybe it landed too well. There was a flicker then. Not suspicion, just a pause. The kind that flits across your thoughts and vanishes before it can build into shape. I dismissed it. I had no reason not to. This was my wife. This was my best friend. This was a simple supply run. Still, neither of them asked if I needed anything else. No one grabbed a list. No one double-checked what was actually missing. They just left. The door closed softly behind them. Not rushed, not hurried, just deliberate. I went back to the kitchen, reorganized a few trays, stirred the punch, answered a message from a colleague who couldn't make it. Did the kinds of things hosts do to keep things on schedule. But the minutes started to stretch. 10, then 20, then 35. I called her phone. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I tried his, straight to missed call. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't panicking, yet. But something in the house had shifted. That earlier hum of preparation had dulled into a kind of static. The speakers still played music. But it felt distant, like the soundtrack to someone else's gathering. At 45 minutes, they returned. She was carrying a bag that looked too light for the time they'd been gone. No bulk, no visible napkin packs, just a single white candle poking out the top. "Traffic was awful," she said, brushing past me toward the kitchen. He followed, not looking up. "Yeah," he added, "accident near the turnpike, total mess." They didn't elaborate. I didn't press. But I looked at the clock. 4:30 they left. 5:15 they returned. No one mentioned why they had gone to a store 15 minutes away that didn't sell party supplies. No one explained the absence of half the things we needed. Instead, she opened a drawer and began slicing the plastic off a single box of tea lights. "Still got time," she said, cheerful again. "Let's light these and set the mood." And just like that, the conversation pivoted, but something inside me didn't. It held, still, suspended, not yet a wound, but something like a bruise that hadn't bloomed. A silence that didn't scream, but waited. Waited for something undeniable, waited for the part of me that had always trusted both of them, to finally start asking why. The house had filled up. By the time the sun tucked itself behind the trees, the rooms were alight with warmth and noise. Glasses clinked. Someone had started telling stories that curled into laughter. A playlist drifted lazily through the air like old memories wearing fresh clothes. People leaned in closer to be heard. The kind of closeness you only find at birthdays, reunions, weddings, the temporary magic of shared space and celebration. She moved through it all like a conductor, smiling, tilting her head, remembering names, refilling drinks. She was good at this, the soft performance of hostess. It suited her, it made others love her. And watching her, I did too. Even then, even still, he was there, too, my best friend, holding court near the fireplace, telling some half-true story about college days and missed trains. People laughed. He looked over at me a few times, nodding, like nothing had happened, like traffic was real. And the forgotten napkins were just that, forgotten. I nodded back, because sometimes, pretending is easier than pausing a party to dissect the undertow. Then came the cake. It was simple, buttercream, her favorite, We'd picked it out together weeks ago. Chocolate sponge with raspberry filling. I had tasted 3 variations to get this one right. I had imagined this moment, people singing off-key, candles flickering, her eyes closed in a wish. The kind of movie scene sweetness you carry like a keepsake. Everyone gathered in the main room. The lights dimmed, phones raised. Someone began the song. She stood beside the cake, glowing with candlelight, grinning as if every lyric belonged to her. Then she turned. "Come up here," she said, eyes scanning the room. "You too." At first I thought she meant me and her. But her hand extended. "To him. To the 2 most important men in my life," she said. The room cheered. He walked up beside me. I felt the weight of that phrase settle like dust inside my lungs. She handed me the knife. He stood to my left. She to my right. I was in the center of a triangle I had never consented to be part of. The cameras flashed. Glasses raised. Someone shouted, "Make a wish." I smiled. I had to. It was the kind of moment that demanded it. He leaned in, nudged my shoulder playfully. "Let's not mess this up." "Yeah," she laughed. I placed the knife down against the frosting. Felt the blade press into sweetness. The cool resistance of sugar and sponge. The silent collapse of layered perfection. And in that moment, I knew. Not fact, not proof, just knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't ask for evidence. The kind that stands behind your eyes and whispers, "This isn't a cake. This is a line being drawn." And I was the fool holding the knife. They stood so close. Her hand brushed his wrist. He didn't flinch. They didn't look at each other. They didn't have to, because some connections don't need eye contact to be visible. They hum beneath the surface, like a secret chord that only 2 people hear. I sliced. The room cheered. Frosting stuck to the blade like silence clings to a guilty mouth. They handed out plates. He fed a bite to one of our mutual friends. Made a joke. Winked. She wiped her hands on a cloth. Her lipstick still perfect. Her smile still practiced. No one knew that the real split had already happened. Not between cake layers. Between trust and what I once thought was home. The slice I made that night wasn't just dessert. It was division. Neatly cut. Quietly served. Eaten without question. But I tasted something in that moment that no one else could. And it wasn't sweet. After everyone had left, the house sighed into silence. It's the kind of silence that only comes after too much laughter. After music has overstayed its welcome and candles have burned themselves into wax puddles. Plates were stacked in the sink like forgotten intentions. And half-full glasses littered the counters. I moved through it like a ghost wearing the skin of a man who had played the perfect host. The cake knife still sat on the cutting board, its edge dulled with dried frosting. Someone had left their jacket slung over a dining chair. The scent of perfume lingered in the hallway, a floral trace. Expensive and artificial. She had already gone upstairs. Said her feet hurt. Said she was exhausted. Said she was happy. I didn't answer. I told her I'd finished cleaning up. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed movement. Noise. A reason not to lie down and be still. I collected glasses. Tossed napkins. Opened a window to let out the weight of too much celebration. That's when I saw her phone. It was on the armrest of the couch. Screen still lit. Maybe she'd forgotten it in her rush to change. Maybe she left it there intentionally. Maybe the universe, cruel and exacting, decided it was time. I picked it up, not out of suspicion, but out of routine, the same way you move your hand to stop an alarm, the same way you glance at the weather, not to find something, but because you're used to finding nothing. The message blinked in. His name, the same name I had toasted beside an hour earlier, the same name I had once given the spare key to our house. The message was short. 3 words. Run Quor, Ma Fei. My language, but not my world. The timestamp was 5:32 p.m. They had left to buy napkins at 4:30. Returned by 5:15. This message, this sentence dripping with breathlessness and satisfaction, was sent minutes after they came back. After she smiled and brushed past me into the kitchen. After she looked at me like nothing had happened. And asked if I wanted a slice of cheese before guests arrived. I didn't scroll up. I didn't need context. I didn't need emojis or timestamps or deleted photos to paint the rest of the picture. The canvas was complete. One message had filled in every shadow I had tried to ignore. I sat down slowly, like my body had forgotten how to stand. There was no rage, no scream tightening in my throat, no instinct to confront. There was only stillness, the kind that follows an explosion you didn't hear, but now sit inside the wreckage of. I read it again, not to understand it better, but because part of me hoped the words might change. They didn't, they never do. Betrayal isn't vague, it doesn't mumble, it speaks clearly and without punctuation. I placed her phone gently back on the couch, like you do with something fragile, even when you want to smash it. I stood, stared at the photos still pinned on the wall, snapshots of her and me, of him and me, of all three of us once smiling like none of this could ever exist. But it existed now, and it only took a single line to unravel a decade of friendship. A single breath, captured in digital ink, to reduce 5 years of marriage to a moment of theater. That night, I didn't speak, I didn't go upstairs, I just sat in the dark, staring at the same phone that had once held our anniversary videos. Our vacation photos, her late-night notes that ended with hearts. And I knew, with a certainty that didn't need further evidence, there would never be enough candles to cover the darkness now. Not when she had already let someone else blow him out. I didn't rush. That's the first thing I remember, the lack of urgency. No racing pulse, no trembling hands, just an eerie, practiced calm, like my body had already rehearsed this moment in some forgotten rehearsal space of fear. I took the phone again, opened the message, let my eyes fall, once more, on those words I'd memorized within seconds. The syntax burned into me more than any name, any date, any explicit photo ever could. Then I took the screenshot. The act was quiet, mechanical. Tap, tap, saved. I opened my email, typed in my own address. Attached the file. Subject line, don't delete. Send. It arrived in my inbox seconds later. I watched the confirmation screen like it was a life raft, proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. That the truth had, in fact, touched me, that I had captured it before it could vanish back into the silence where so many betrayals live undisturbed. I placed the phone back where I'd found it, exactly as it was. I didn't scroll further, didn't search for more. Sometimes, clarity comes not from volume but from precision. That message, those few obscene, intimate syllables, had done what 100 apologies couldn't undo. And I didn't want noise. I didn't want a fight. I didn't want performance. I wanted what I never needed before: distance from the woman who used to feel like home. The house was dark by then. Midnight had curled itself into the corners. The guests were long gone. The laughter had become memory. And she was upstairs, breathing softly, maybe dreaming, maybe not. I walked up slowly, barefoot, my steps almost reverent. The bedroom door was ajar. Just enough. She lay curled on her side. Back to the door, blankets twisted slightly around her waist. One arm beneath the pillow. Her hair was still pinned from the party, half fallen, like she'd collapsed without trying to undo the night. I stood there for a long time, just watching, the way you might study a painting in a museum after hearing the artist was a fraud. The form still beautiful, the composition unchanged, but the meaning gone, altered, hollowed. She looked peaceful. That's what struck me the most. Not guilt-ridden, not restless, peaceful, as if the weight I now carried belonged only to me. I didn't speak, didn't touch her shoulder, didn't shake her awake demanding answers, because I already knew them. And some truths, when spoken out loud, only dirty the air around them. I returned to the hallway, sat on the steps just outside our bedroom. My bedroom, our bedroom, whatever it was now, and I didn't sleep, not for a minute. The night passed like a slow bleed, silent, inevitable, without panic. No one would have known, looking in, that something sacred had just been severed. No doors slammed, no dishes shattered, only me, in a house full of evidence, sitting quietly with the knowing. There's something brutal about quiet endurance. The kind of strength that isn't built on reaction, but restraint. That doesn't ask for justice, just space. That doesn't scream, because screaming would mean acknowledging that someone still owed you something. But I was done waiting for that. At sunrise, she stirred. I heard her move, the gentle creak of the mattress, the whisper of sheets. I stayed on the stairs, unmoving. She didn't notice me there. Didn't see the man who had once memorized every breath she took, now sitting in the shadows, learning how to forget them. And I realized, not all wounds require bandages. Some need air, and time, and the silence to learn how not to reach for the same fire again. Morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like a continuation of the same silence that had clung to me through the night. The light pouring through the kitchen windows was pale and indifferent. Nothing about it offered warmth or reassurance. Just exposure. I hadn't slept. That much was obvious. My bones ached in a way that had nothing to do with age. The stairs felt longer, the air heavier. I opened the refrigerator. The cake was still there, wrapped in clear plastic, perched like an artifact from another life. I pulled it out gently, the way one might retrieve a love letter found years later in a drawer you forgot you used to open. It was the same cake, chocolate sponge, raspberry core, buttercream frosting, a celebration in design. It had once meant something. It had once been a symbol of planning, of shared choices, of sweetness. Now it just sat there, cold. I set it on the counter and cut a slice. The knife moved through it easily, the layers obedient, the kind of neat, clean division you wish people were capable of. I placed the slice on a plate, picked up a fork, took a bite. The texture was right, moist, balanced. The raspberry hinted at tartness just behind the sugar. But there was no flavor. None. My mouth processed it as matter, not taste, just substance, just weight. I tried again, slower, still nothing. The sweetness didn't register. The frosting felt like paste. The raspberry like an apology offered too late. I set the fork down, walked to the living room. My phone was still where I left it the night before. I picked it up and opened the photo gallery. There it was, the photo someone had taken while we stood together. The three of us, me, her, and him, right before the cake was cut. We were smiling. My hand held the knife. Theirs rested near mine, almost touching, all eyes toward the camera. And behind those eyes, three different truths. Mine, belief. His, betrayal. Hers, performance. It was a good photo. Clean, well lit, joyful, if you didn't know better. The kind people frame. The kind that goes on social media with captions like, "So lucky to be surrounded by love." I stared at it until my vision blurred, not from tears, but from something deeper, from the realization that this moment, frozen and smiling, was the exact second I became the punchline to a joke I didn't know I was in. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just pressed delete. The image vanished with a flick, like truth does when no one's ready to hold it. I closed the app, turned the phone off, laid it gently on the table beside the uneaten cake. Then I went upstairs, packed a small bag, nothing dramatic, just a change of clothes, a charger, a toothbrush. I didn't want to be the person who stormed out. I wanted to be the person who left quietly, the way a light goes out when everyone assumes it's still on. Before I left, I stood one last time in the kitchen. The cake was still there. I looked at it, the slice, the untouched plate, the fork with one prong slightly bent. So much care had gone into it. So much sweetness. And yet here it was, rejected by appetite, mocked by memory. I whispered, more to myself than to the room, "Not everyone who celebrates you wants your happiness." Then I walked out, left the cake, left the house, left the version of me that still believed people show you who they are when they smile for photos. Sometimes the real story happens between the flash and the silence. And sometimes, you don't finish the cake, because it was never meant for you.